In the heart of a quiet old town, the kind with lamplights that still flickered at dusk and chimneys that puffed gentle trails of smoke, there stood a forgotten little shop at the corner of Wren Street. The sign above its door had faded to nearly illegibility, but if one squinted, they might still make out the words Harper and Time. For nearly 2 decades, the shop had slept beneath layers of dust and silence. Its windows were clouded, its clocks frozen in place as if holding their breath. That changed one golden morning in early autumn. Clara Bell, a woman in her early 60s with warm eyes and silvering hair, swept into a clip, stepped out of a taxi and onto the cobbled street. In one hand she held a modest suitcase, in the other a key, a brass one, old and weighty, given to her in a sealed envelope marked "For Clara when the time is right." It had arrived just weeks after passing of her grandfather, Arthur Harper, a man she hadn't seen since she was a teenager. A clockmaker by trade, a mystery by nature. She stood before the wooden door for a long moment, taking in the spell of damp wood, oil, and autumn leaves. Her fingers brushed the carving on the door frame. She remembered tracing it as a child. When she returned the key, the lock clicked open with surprising ease. As the door creaked inward, the scent of time itself seemed to drift out. Clocks of every kind lined the walls inside, tall grandfather clocks with brass pendulums, delicate mantel clocks with porcelain faces, even old little cuckoo clocks with fading paint, but none ticked, not even one. Clara stepped inside and stood still as though waiting for the room to recognize her. It didn't. The air was quiet, reverent almost. She set to work, dusting, opening windows, folding back heavy drapes. A thin layer of memory coated everything. She moved slowly, not out of age but out of something else. Reverence perhaps, or awe, or something unnamed. As the sun began to dip low in the sky and long shadows crept along the wooden floor, Clara paused to wipe her forehead. She looked around at the shop, now just a little brighter, a little less asleep, and then it happened. A soft sound, almost shy, broke the silence. Tick, tick, cuckoo. Clara spun toward the shelf behind her. A small cuckoo clock, no larger than a loaf of bread, had chimed entirely on its own. She blinked. She hadn't wooded. Had she? Curious, she took the clock gently into her hands. Its paint was chipped, but the tiny bird inside still wore a bright red cap. Turning it over, she noticed the back panel was slightly loose. Behind it, tucked into the hollow of the clock's wooden body, was a tightly rolled piece of paper. She unrolled it with careful fingers. The handwriting was thin, elegant, and unmistakably familiar. To find what's lost, rewind the time. Clara's heart gave a quiet skip. It was a kind of line her grandfather might have written in a birthday card or a crossword puzzle. He had always loved riddles, but this wasn't just a riddle, it was a message, a clue. Her eyes scanned the room again, but now something had shifted. The clocks didn't feel quite so silent anymore. Something had stirred, a breath in the walls, a whisper beneath the floorboards. She held the note close as if it might warm her hands. And somewhere deep in the shop, though she couldn't be sure, she thought she heard the faintest tick, tick, tick. The cuckoo clock sat on the counter, silent once more, its red-capped bird tucked away inside. Clara Bell stood with a note still in her hands, reading the words again and again. To find what's lost, rewind the time. She said it aloud, softly, as though hearing it might help it make sense. But riddles were rarely direct, especially not when they came from Arthur Harper. Setting the note aside, she began exploring the shop more deliberately. There was something in the air now, not just dust but possibility. It clung to the beams and shelves, settled into the corners where sunlight didn't reach. Behind the counter was a narrow doorway that led to the back of the shop, the workshop. She hesitated only briefly before pushing it open. A familiar scent hit her instantly. Metal fillings, varnish, and the faint sweetness of old tobacco, her grandfather's pipe. The workshop was just as he would left it. Tools still lay on the long wooden bench. Loops and gears and tiny screwdrivers were tucked neatly in drawers. A magnifying lamp hovered over a velvet-lined tray where a disassembled pocket watch rested in mid-repair, as if time itself had stopped mid-breath. Clara approached the bench and ran her fingers along the edge. She remembered this place. She would sat here as a child, swinging her legs and watching her grandfather work, entraced by the delicate world of ticking hearts he built with his hands. Then she saw it, another clock, small, elegant, with a polished cherry wood frame. Unlike the others, this one wasn't mounted on a wall or tucked on a shelf. It stood in the very center of the workbench, almost like it was waiting for her. She leaned in. It wasn't ticking, but as she reached out to touch it, she noticed something strange. Its hands were moving backwards, slowly, silently. A soft click echoed from within the clock. Then another, and then the back panel swung open with a quiet creak, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was a tiny brass key. Not a winding key. No, this one looked more like a drawer key. Next to it, folded neatly, was a piece of aged parchment. Clara unfolded it and read the note written in that same unmistakable hand. Begin where we ended, the drawer below the world. Clara furrowed her brow. Below the world? She whispered. She looked around the room. On the wall opposite the bench hung a large, detailed map, not of the earth but of constellations. The night sky, drawn in sweeping arcs and dotted with inked stars. Beneath it stood an old wooden cabinet she hadn't noticed before, perhaps because it blended so perfectly into the shadows. Kneeling, Clara found a row of drawers at the base. She tried the brass key. The third drawer from the left gave a satisfying click and slid open. Inside were more papers, blueprints, letters, diagrams of intricate clockwork systems. But one thing stood out among them, a photograph. Black and white, slightly faded. It showed a much younger Arthur Harper holding a clock that looked remarkably like the one on the bench, standing beside a woman Clara didn't recognize. On the back of the photo was a single name written in pencil, Eleanor. Clara stared at the name. Something stirred in her memory, a story her mother once told her, Long ago, about a woman who had vanished, but she had never heard her grandfather speak the name. The clocks in the front of the shop were ticking now, slowly, rhythmically, as though something had begun to awaken. Clara sat in the workshop's single creaky chair, the photograph of her grandfather and the mysterious woman Eleanor resting in her lap. The air had grown cooler as evening settled in, and the clocks outside ticked in slow unison as though urging her forward. She stared at the image again. Eleanor. The name stirred something vague and soft in her chest, like a tune she couldn't quite remember. Who was she? Why had Arthur never mentioned her? Setting the photo aside, Clara turned her attention to the blueprints from the drawer. Most were standard diagrams of gears and escapements, but one was different. It wasn't a clock, not exactly. It looked like a schematic for something much more elaborate. At the top of the page, in her grandfather's careful handwriting, was a title, The Memory Engine. Clara whispered the name aloud. The design was unlike anything she had ever seen. It resembled a tall cabinet with clock faces embedded in its doors, each labeled not by hours but by years. 1956, 1967, 1982. Some were scratched out, others circled. Along the side was a note. Each tick recalls a moment. Turn only what you wish to remember. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She rose and scanned the workshop, her eyes finally settling onto a tall, cloth-covered shape in the corner, something she had overlooked in the dim light. Her heart quickened. With both hands, she pulled back the cloth. There it was, the very machine from the blueprint, towering, intricate, and impossibly delicate. Dozens of small knobs and hands lined its surface. Beneath, a glass panel were tiny sliding drawers labeled with dates, and underneath that, a brass lever marked Engage Memory. The machine was lifeless now, but it hummed with potential. Clara reached for a small brass panel near its base and found another note tucked behind it. This one read, "You asked me once why I work with clocks. Because some memories are too precious to lose to time. Find Eleanor. She's the reason this machine was built." Clara's pulse thudded in her ears. There was more to her grandfather than riddles and silence, much more. And now she could feel the weight of the story pressing forward, like time itself leaning in. But just as she folded the note, she heard it again, a sound from the front of the shop, a door creaking open. She froze. Had she locked it? Footsteps, slow, careful. Someone else was here. Clara stepped lightly into the front room, the ticking of the clocks now sharp in her ears. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the street lamp's glow. Not a stranger, a boy. 16, maybe 17, with a mop of curly hair and an old leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He looked just as surprised to see Clara as she was to see him. Sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to. The door was open." Clara took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" The boy hesitated. My name is Leo Harper." Clara blinked. "Harper?" He nodded. "Arthur was my great-grandfather. Clara stared, in fact stunned. Time didn't just move forward or back. Sometimes it looped. New faces, old secrets, and a machine that may unlock memories lost to time. Leo Harper, a name that echoed her own. He looked awkward and nervous, shifting on his feet. His eyes, though curious, cautious, familiar, reminded her of Arthur's. I didn't know anyone else was connected to him, Clara finally said, her voice soft with surprise. I didn't either, Leo replied, until a week ago. From his satchel, he pulled out a small flat box and held it out to her. Clara took it gently and opened the lid. Inside was a pocket watch, ornate, heavy, etched with the Harper and Time emblem. She recognized it immediately. It had belonged to Arthur. But it wasn't just any watch. This one had no hands. Instead, in the center of its glass face sat a small brass dial marked with a single word, unlock. I found it in my attic, Leo said, in a tin labeled, if you are ready. My mum says it was passed down from Arthur, but we never knew much about him. He left much before I was born, Leo whispered. Clara's mind reeled. What had Arthur been playing all these years? For that matter, planning all these years. She gestured for Leo to come in, locking the door behind him. Back in the workshop, she showed him the memory engine. Leo's eyes widened. It looks like something out of a dream. Clara nodded. It might be. They stood side by side, inspecting the drawers. Many were empty, but one, labeled 1962, had a faint golden glow seeping from its edge. Clara hesitated, then slid it open. Inside was a slip of film, delicate, wound tightly on a tiny reel, and another note. The year Eleanor disappeared, start here. Leo stepped back. Who's Eleanor? Clara sighed. I don't know, not fully, but she mattered. And I think she vanished because of this machine. Leo looked down at the strange pocket watch. Do you think this works with it? Without answering, Clara placed the watch into a small circular indentation on the memory engine. The fit was perfect. A faint hum ran through the floorboards. The machine whirred to life. Gears spun. Lights blinked behind frosted glass. The drawers vibrated softly, like they were waking from a dream. And then, without warning, the workshop shifted. The walls shimmered. The clock hands all aligned to the same moment. Clara grabbed Leo's arm as the film inside the 1962 drawer began to play, not on a screen, but in the air itself. A ghostly scene unfolded before them. A young Arthur standing in the shop. Eleanor, a woman with dark curls and steady eyes, was handing him a box. She spoke, but no sound reached them, only the ticking of unseen clocks. Then, lightning, a sudden flash. Eleanor vanished. The box fell to the floor, and the vision faded. Clara and Leo stood in silence. The machine had just shown them something real, something buried. Leo looked at Clara. What just happened? The memory of Eleanor's disappearance still shimmered in Clara's mind as she and Leo stood in the quiet of the workshop. The memory engine had gone still, yet a subtle hum lingered like it was waiting. Leo opened Arthur's final notebook entry from his satchel. If Clara ever comes back, she'll know where to look. The sundial still points home. Clara's breath caught. She rushed to the back courtyard and found it. The old iron sundial, Under the fading light, the words etched at its base began to glow. Where shadows fall, memory calls. She placed her hand on it. Click! A slab of stone slid aside. A hidden staircase appeared, winding down into the dark. Above, the clocks began ticking backward. Clara and Leo descended. In the underground room, a compass-shaped table pulsed faintly with light. 3 small vials rested in its center, each filled with a silvery, swirling liquid. "These aren't just vials," Clara whispered. "They are fragments of someone." Leo leaned closer. "Is it Eleanor's?" Clara nodded slowly. "Yes. My grandfather couldn't bear losing her, so he captured her essence, her voice, her laughter, her warmth, and sealed them into these. They are memory anchors." "But why 3?" Leo asked. Clara took a breath. "Because memories aren't simple." He saved her piece by piece. But the memory engine wasn't meant to hold her forever. It was a temporary sanctuary until someone could finish what he started. Leo paused. "But why you? Why leave you clues?" Clara looked around the chamber. "Because I think I was meant to set her free. Grandpa couldn't. His grief kept him tied to her, but he hoped someday someone he loved enough would return, someone strong enough to let go." She uncorked the first vial. The liquid ran through the compass grooves like moonlight, glowing with warmth. The room responded, the gears turned, and slowly a shimmering figure appeared in the air. Eleanor. She was faint, fragile, like a reflection in rippling water. Clara whispered, "She's not fully here, just fragments." She released the second vial. Eleanor's form grew stronger, her face clearer, her eyes glimmering with emotion. Leo looked at Clara. "You knew her, didn't you?" Clara hesitated. "I don't remember her clearly. Just lullabies, a scent, a warmth. Grandpa never spoke about her, but seeing her now, I feel it. I think, and I'm sure, she was my grandmother." Leo nodded. "Then this matters even more." Clara held the final vial. Her hand trembled. "This last piece," she said, "will complete the memory, but there's a cost." Leo frowned. "What kind of cost?" Clara turned to him. "These vials aren't just holding Eleanor's time anymore. They have been feeding off mine, tying themselves to me. To finish it, I have to let go of some of my own memories, ones I may never get back." Leo looked at her and took her hand. "Are you sure?" Clara smiled gently. "She deserves peace, and love means making room, even if it means letting go." She poured the final vial. The chamber erupted in light. Eleanor stood before them, whole at last, glowing with warmth and life, but not mortal. A spirit, a memory released. She smiled at Clara. "You have done what Arthur couldn't. You gave me back my voice, my story, and my peace." Clara felt something shift inside. Quietly, parts of her past dissolved. A childhood song, a bedtime story, the sound of her mother's laughter lost to time. But she smiled. "You were never meant to stay trapped," Clara whispered. "You were meant to be remembered and to be freed forever." Eleanor's form rose slowly, drifting toward the morning light spilling through the staircase above. "Goodbye, Clara," she whispered. Thank you for setting me free." And she was gone. The clocks all around began to tick in harmony. Clara looked around the room, once filled with sorrow, now bathed in peace. "Arthur's secret wasn't about stopping time," she said softly. "It was about understanding it, about knowing when to hold on and when to let go." Leo smiled. "Yeah, the clockmaker's true gift." Clara nodded, her voice steady. "Let's go home now." As Clara makes the ultimate choice, we learn that memories aren't just moments frozen in time. They are threads that connect us even across generations. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on, it's letting go with grace. Thank you for walking this path with Clara and Leo, a journey where time taught us the beauty of remembrance, the courage of sacrifice, and the quiet magic of release. That's the end of The Clockmaker's Secret, a story of time, memory, and love's lasting imprint. If this tale touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to the Story Capsule Time for more magical journeys. Until next time, keep your memories close, your heart open, and your spirit curious. The end.